if psychology and pop culture had a baby, they'd call it Shrink Tank.
There is a sort of pendulum that's swinging back and forth where we kind of go from one extreme.
And I think there's an element of truth to
because
this.
I have something interesting later in the show that will make you feel very weird.
From Nashville and Charlotte, this is the Shrink Tank Podcast. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. We have a fantastic show for you. Our trending topic today is Jordan Peele's Us. Should be a good conversation, but first we're going to meet our Charlotte panel. Dr. Emma Kate Wright is here. Emma Kate, are you someone who enjoys scary movies? We've talked about this a little bit before, but do you actually enjoy going to see scary movies?
I do, but I feel like it's shifted some as I've gotten older, where now it doesn't scare me quite as much. I used to really freak out and be jumpy, and now I'm kind of always trying to figure out what's going to be the twist, what's going to happen, and so I'm not as spooked.
I'm the same way. I used to be really scared to the point where I wouldn't go to movies that were scary, and now it's like they don't scare me much. I'm more analytical about them or something. I don't find them very scary.
Or you're closer to real life death.
Right.
So.
Maybe.
There are other things in life that are actually scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Frank Gaskell's with us. Frank, are you a big fan of the scary movie? I think I know the answer to this.
I love scary movies, but it has to be either really good or really, really bad. It's just one or the other. But like it scared me to death. I actually had nightmares. But I think I'm closer to where you stand in terms of thinking about it. And the horror movies that I like aren't necessarily horror. It's closer to thriller, Stephen King type stuff. So, yeah.
So give me an example of a bad one. You said really good or really bad. Give me a stinker that you really like.
The one you and I watched that was the zombie Nazis.
Oh, that was so good.
Dead Snow?
Blood.
That sounds terrible.
It was so good. It's so bad.
Dead Snow?
Dead Snow.
Was that it? It was a Norwegian Nazi zombie movie.
Yeah,
that's true.
So when you get gutted by a zombie, and your intestines, you're holding on to intestines,
right,
hanging from a cliff.
Right, you go over a cliff, but you hold on to someone else's intestines.
And the intestines are like strong enough to hold you and a zombie that's chewing on your neck. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So what part of that is stupid? Like, that's realistic.
It was all stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was honestly one of my favorite movie watching experiences ever.
It was. And the sequel is they accidentally sew a zombie arm onto a guy who had his arm amputated, and the zombie arm starts killing the doctors and nurses against his will.
Okay.
So great.
Oh, well, Jonathan Hedderly's also here. He's our certified Asian who rounds out the panel. And each week, Jonathan trolls around the internet. He finds a great story of psychology in the news. It's our first segment that we call
Being Human.
So people who have trouble with romantic relationships may watch movies and TV shows for more than just a chance to escape from their lives. Research is informing us for people with attachment issues, movies and TV shows can be a way to try to understand their problems or to vicariously meet their needs for intimacy in a way that they may find difficult in real life. Now, they looked at 3 different types of attachment styles in this research. The folks with avoidant attachment were less engaged with stories and film and television. Those with anxious attachment styles were more engaged. But the biggest takeaway were those with anxious avoidant attachment styles. They engaged in storytelling, films, and TV in a variety of ways. They were more likely to say they were absorbed or transported into the story world. They reported that stories helped them understand people they didn't know, that they imagined what would happen if characters in shows made different choices, and that they liked to imagine they knew their favorite TV and movie characters personally. So, Chuckles Frank here, our resident attachment style specialist. What do you make of people with attachment disorders connecting in a very unique way to storytelling through film and television?
Well, I found it, I really enjoyed reading the article, and I'd never really even, I wouldn't even be able to come up with the idea of this as a study or an article. But I have an anxious attachment style.
Huh.
And so, yeah.
Let's just clear that up in the research. It everyday language, what that means is they're needy, right? They're needy people.
Fair enough.
Right.
So Frank is a needy person.
I'm far better than I was. I'm not as needy.
So-
and I don't really – okay, whatever. But I find my personal experience of this to be really true, where emotions get really stirred up. I can believe in a movie more than some of my colleagues who are more critical of a movie. And if I get that emotional attachment to it, I can believe in just about anything. And I'll tell you, it's really frustrating because when there's a really powerful emotional moment, I will feel my throat literally closing and I'm about to burst into tears and I have to fight it. And it happens every time I watch Apollo 13. And I was watching Captain Marvel with my son. He's sitting next to me. And when she fully realizes who she is, that's all I'm going to say.
But she's Captain
When
America.
she fully expresses it, I'm going, oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And I had to look away to not cry. But I also spoke to somebody who has a more avoidant attachment style. And they said that there's certain movies that kind of works for that, but it takes a lot more for them to sort of dig in and believe it. They're more critical.
So before we go on, let's just define what we're talking about with attachment style. Like all humans are wired to form attachments with other people, and their early experiences and their temperament sort of come together, and there's one of 4 attachment styles. So the first is secure, and that's what it sounds like. The second is a anxious style, which is Frank. Basically, an anxious style is I need to be in a relationship a lot, and when I'm not in a relationship, I feel anxious, and when I'm in a relationship, I worry about it, and I worry about the other person and whether they regard me as highly as I regard them, and all those kinds of things. A lot of anxiety around that. Then there's an avoidance style, which is a tendency to kind of push off or, kind of keep things at arm's length. And a lot of thought is that that's also driven by anxiety, but it's a different kind of thing. It's a response of like, I don't want to be hurt, or I, want to have the upper hand or something like that. And so there's kind of an arm's length. And then there's a fourth one, which is what Jonathan was talking about, this anxious avoidant. Sometimes it's called a disorganized style. It is probably less than 5% of the population, but it is the style that is the least healthy. I think that's a fair way to say it. Because it is basically like if you had anxious and avoidant and mash them together. It's sort of like I need to be in a relationship, but then I push away from the relationship. And then it's always like push, pull, come here, go away, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're talking about.
Way to go, Frank, that you don't have the least healthy attachment style.
Congratulations, Frank.
That's a win.
Yeah.
That is a win.
Yeah.
So what did you say that the anxious and anxious avoidant folks, that they get really invested in the
Yeah, they get absorbed. They get transported into the story world. They imagine what would happen to the characters if they made different choices in the story. And they like to imagine that they knew their favorite TV and movie characters personally.
And my take on that would be, because it's the least healthy, it comes from a place of like, they don't have often a good internal schema or framework for real relationships. Like they don't have it. And so this is the closest approximation to that. And they also don't have good boundaries in like, what's mine, what's yours, where do I start and stop? And so it would be easier to kind of immerse into a character, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the safest way to feel like you're getting some of that relationship need met without really exposing yourself or being in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, the example in the article was looking at Pam and Jim's relationship on The Office and just sort of ignoring all the bad parts of the relationship and just idealizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great and Jonathan, you said a key thing. It makes sense that this style of attachment would find it safer to kind of have a relationship with character. right? It's like it's a way of having a relationship from a distance. So there's a safety to it. Cool. All right, well, let's move on. And we're going to talk about our trending topic today. But before we do that, if you have thoughts about this whole idea of attachment style and attachment and characters and media, we'd love to hear from you. You can let us know by tweeting at us at @shrink_tank, or you can write us at feedback@shrinktank.com. We'd also love for you to check out our YouTube page, where we are having video versions of this podcast and lots of heat on that too. So, hey, everybody on video. Let's talk about our trending topic, which is Jordan Peele's Us. I assume all of us have seen it. Everybody on the panel's seen it. All right. So let's do our usual round robin of general impression. We'll get into the deeper stuff in a second about like the meaning of things and all that, but just general instant reaction, how you felt about the movie, what you thought about the movie. Emma Kate.
I absolutely loved this movie. When I got out of the film, I saw it with one of our producers, Mariel, Butler, and I just felt like my mind was blown, and I haven't had that sort of sensation or feeling after a movie probably since I watched The Sixth Sense.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's been a long time since I just thoroughly enjoyed that sort of scary movie.
Nice. Frank.
I would agree with Emma Kate. I love this movie, and trying not to be full of hyperbole, there's that idea that every story has been told. And when I walked out, I felt as if I had seen a story that had never been told. And it also is weird because I've talked to a couple people who saw it, and they said they hated it. That they just said they didn't like it, they wouldn't recommend it, they thought it was a mess.
Interesting.
But I would see it many, many times.
We'll talk about that. Jonathan.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I think it's very engrossing in the moment. I think it's very ambitious and maybe a little muddled. Like I don't think that this is a great movie because it makes you think and entertain all these possibilities. And there are some things I think are very specific, but I think Jordan Peele also threw in a lot there that allows breathing room and some fun, speculation, things of that nature. But I do think it is very ambitious, and because of that, it is probably a little bit muddled compared to Get Out, which I think was a much more self-contained and tightly constructed film. I like them both a lot, but for different reasons. But it's clear Jordan Peele is a super immense creative person that is one of those rare breeds that's able to jump from one genre like comedy into another. And it's like he's been born. He's so creative. He's kind of like Donald Glover. He's so creative. It doesn't matter what he's doing. He's able to do it at such a high level of craft and skill.
Okay. I'm going to enjoy this conversation because of where we're falling on this. I will say I totally agree with the Jordan Peele assessment. I think he is brilliant and his filmmaking style is amazing. I did not love this film. I did not hate the film. So I want to use the conversation a little selfishly, but I'll be a proxy for the audience. I need to be convinced of why you guys loved it. And so here, let me give you my take on it. On a level of just on the top level, superficial, a scary, creepy movie, really enjoyed it. Thought it was awesome. And thought that level was really cool. The filmmaking aspects of it were really good. The characters were really good. That part I liked. I enjoyed it. Glad I saw it. There's this other level of like, what is the meaning of this stuff? What does it mean that I'm not 100% sure, A, I get, or B, other people get? Because when I've read it, I made a point of not reading before I went to see it. Then I was like, okay, I don't get it. I read it. Everything I read said different things. It was like, I love it because it means this, and I love it. And so I will tell you this before you guys help me out with this. I know in the broadest sense, kind of the idea is the evil is us, or the evil's, it's like we're the evil. And to me, great, but that's not an especially profound thought. So
It is to Emma Kate. Knock it off. Come on.
Maybe.
So help me out with, I don't need any convincing that it was a well-made movie and that it was really cool on the level of, if I just didn't think there was other meaning to it, just experiencing the movie as the movie, I would be like, awesome. Help me out with the other part of it.
I think what you're kind of getting at is this piece regarding the amount of thought that you had to have. So I felt like I was engaged in thinking constantly during this film. And as soon as I started watching it, I realized, holy crap, this is falling into the idea of a shadow. So Carl Jung was a student of Freud, and he had this idea of the shadow archetype, which is essentially we all have this dark side to who we are. People can think about examples from the famous Stanford prison experiment, where these good kids, good university students got into a really horrible situation where they ended up abusing their peers. And so the phrase, good apples in a bad barrel. So when I watched this, I realized, okay, we all have this dark side. We all have the capacity to do bad, but yet we also have free will. And it's more about just trying to figure out how do we rectify the things that we like and dislike about ourselves. Because when I kept watching it, I was thinking, okay, all these, the tethered people down below are the aspects of ourselves that we don't like, that we don't want people to see. And so my mind was just going, and I really enjoyed it from that angle.
Okay.
Well, I think Emma Kate said it better than I could, but
Shock.
I was just thinking through the entire movie. I felt like I couldn't grasp everything that was happening, and I was trying to. And when there's the twist, I had no idea that was going to happen, and that was sort of the Sixth Sense moment for me.
And neither did I. The guy, I saw it with two other people, and one of them said, "Oh, I figured that out," which I don't. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's a very good critic of film, but I didn't see it coming, and I thought that was really cool. I like that a lot. We won't say what it is, but I enjoyed it.
And the other thing, when I came out of the movie, I just didn't feel like I knew what just happened to me.
Yeah, I remember Frank coming to be like, "What did I see? It was amazing, but what did I just see?"
Yeah, I couldn't get my mind around it, and I had to read a lot. And then it was a week after I'd seen it. There's the boy, his name's Pluto, who's the tethered. But then, well, was he tethered? Was he not? And how did he have the face? And then I was thinking about the magic trick that he kept trying to do, and who was controlling who, and does he know? But I'll tell you this. My favorite part, well, that's not true. One of my most nostalgic parts of the film was the
movie
ambulance
you saw a week ago.
It was that. No, just shut up, Hatterley, and let me talk. You're an idiot. So at the end of the movie, the two characters look at each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the one character pulls the mask down. That is a homage to the final scene of the 1980s movie, The Twilight Zone, because the ambulance is the last scene, and the line is, "You want to see something really scary?" And my hair stood up with that scene. Like, wow, that is so subtle.
There are definitely a lot of pop culture references throughout. There's everything. I mean, there's Michael Jackson stuff. There's Jaws. There's Chud. There's all kinds.
Chud.
I mean,
Chud.
I always put those three things in equal
together.
significance.
Yeah, they're all
Jaws, Michael Jackson, Chud.
The other thing that I really appreciated is what's the name of the actress?
Lupita Nyong'o.
Wow, what a performance! And I watched her talk about how she created the voice. I can't remember the medical term for it, but that's an actual condition that's brought on by trauma. And she had to practice it and go with it. And the Jordan Peele could only film her as the red character on some days, and she couldn't switch back and forth. They had to just film her separately because it would bleed over.
she's clearly one of our greatest living actresses.
Man.
Oh,
yeah.
my gosh.
No question.
She's immensely talented.
All right, Jonathan, help me out.
Well, I started to thread some things together when I was watching it, and then I read a bunch of stuff afterwards. And I draw the conclusion that the movie is a little muddled, that there's all this extra stuff thrown in there. But I think there, for me, is a predominant theme that the movie is constructed around. And I think it's actually this whole idea of duality, or, having two parts, two sides to the same coin, double, an either or both, that there's something separate yet tethered or connected together. And I think it's right there in the title. The title, Us, can also double as the U.S.
Yep.
And so when you think about upper and lower, I think the first thing of duality here is class system. And the interesting thing about the lower class, the tethered, is they are very aware of the people above them, and they have access to see and experience at a very distant level their lives. But the upper class are pretty oblivious to the lower class. And so I think he's saying a lot there in terms of how our culture works, of that the plight of the underclass and the impoverished have this view of what life could be like, but it's always out of reach. And people of privilege and affluence, it's so easy to disregard and be oblivious to the plight of people beneath you. And yet, from a cultural standpoint, they're tethered together. There can't be an upper class without a lower class. People can't live in privilege if there aren't other people that have to do the dirty work of our culture, and yet they oftentimes are thought of less of, or that they are more disposable. So you have that upper and lower. I think the Hands of America component adds to that in terms of the facade of, even when people well-intentioned of privilege and affluence try to do things that are well-intentioned, from the lower class people, it's shallow, it's superficial. It's more for those people to feel good about themselves than it actually makes a lot of difference. And so you think again about masks of wanting to seem like you care about people. Get Out was all about performative wokeism. This may be sort of the same thing in terms of performative or shallow care about poverty or race relations and things of that nature. But it lacks real depth or change. And that's coming from the perspective not of the affluent, it's coming from the lower class. Something like Hands Across America did nothing for that systematic injustice. And so you have that there. And then finally, I think I read this in an interview with Jordan Peele, was that he talked about using the word us, because our culture right now is using a lot of that tribal terminology of us versus them, of like blaming others, this internal versus external locus of control and responsibility. We blame other people, outsiders, for the ills of our culture and country, versus taking a look at how we have created and perpetuate this system of injustice that in some ways, for those of us, and I would put us in this group, like we align ourselves more with the affluent and privileged than we do the impoverished. So we benefit from those that are underclass. And it's easy when things go wrong to look at other people. And then the final thing, I know I've probably been rambling on, is the Bible verse, Jeremiah 11:11. And that talks about in the Bible where God gives his people land, and then they completely disregard his covenant laws, and then he brings judgment upon them. So even if we think about Americans and America as the promised land, and yet there might be a critique, I think it's a spot-on critique, whether it be with our race relations or whether it be with the Native Americans. Like we definitely built the greatness of this country off the abuse and suffering of many people, and yet we still see ourselves as the good people in the world.
Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, for talking about all of that, because I didn't get the line at the moment, I had this hint of what it probably meant. But when the dad says, "Who are you people?"
We're
Americans. I went, oh my gosh, this is a deep movie that I will not understand.
Mm-hmm. I totally buy that. And honestly, and I'm not saying this to be stupid, that changes the movie for me. Like, I think that helps me get it in a really significant way. As you're saying that, like I'm thinking back to the elements of the movie and the parts that confused me, and that makes sense to me. That's what's going on here. That's very cool.
And that affluence and upward mobility of that poor dad who bought that crap boat.
That was
It just made me feel sad. It's like, dude, you're trying so hard, but it's just not working.
Frank's like, you don't have a nice boat like mine.
Yeah.
No, I don't have
never
a
buy
boat.
A crap boat.
No, but even the idea that this boat wouldn't start, and it's just like, oh, that's just rough.
But I do think, because again, I like Jonathan, I caught that duality piece immediately. And I think one of the things is being conveyed in this film is it's this notion of who I am actually depends on who we are. So all of our actions, all of our choices, all of our behaviors impact people more than we could ever truly know. And, it really is this sort of us versus them mentality. And when we have that, there's a divisiveness that occurs, and it does create that sort of tribal vibe. And the reality is we can't continue to go through life like this. We have to figure out, how do we make contact with people from different races, sexual orientations. And I don't think that's one of the main themes necessarily, but it's something that came out of it for me.
I have a question. I haven't researched this, and I know the rabbits were food, but what was the deal with the rabbits?
Ooh. So think about it, because what do we do a lot of scientific experiments on?
Rabbits.
Animals, right? So they're these cute little bunnies.
Yeah.
And even then, bunnies, I feel like, have a dual nature to themselves, because it's like, oh, they're so soft and fluffy. But I think they're also kind of creepy because they're little beady eyes, especially when they have like the red eyes. People know what I'm talking about.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
To me, I think this movie is operating on a number of different levels, and I don't know if they're fully integrated together. Like a purely cinematic horror film, I think it scares, it thrills. I think the twist ending and stuff like that is operating on a different level versus the larger culture commentary.
Right.
But I do think that there is a little bit of this idea of experimentation, that oftentimes there is a sacrifice for the privilege and the luxuries that the upper level of people do. So when you think about medicine, when you think about all these things, it requires failure and sacrifice. And so when you think about even animals, or in the past human sacrifices, or slavery, or taking the land away from the Native Americans in order to create affluence and luxury for some, others have to suffer, or at least that's the story of America.
That completely, okay, you've resolved my issue, because that explains the cages, but also them being set free.
Them being set free.
Okay, I get it.
And I think the twist ending works in one way about this larger culture commentary, which is the twist ending makes us step back and say, okay, who's really the protagonist and who's really the villain in this story? And I think that is a question that Jordan Peele is very provocatively asking us when we think about America. Who is the villain and who is the protagonist versus we're America, we're Americans, we must be the good guys. And yet there's a lot of Americans living in our country, participating and providing for this nation, that may not always feel like we're treating them, like we're the good guys.
Right. And we have to start taking responsibility for the choices and actions we make without overly identifying those negative parts of ourselves. And
At least we're not Russians.
Well,
That's all I got to say.
But even then, adding to that, I love the use of the golden scissors. So not only was it could have been any kind of scissors, but it was gold, which again, I think speak to that, economic divide potentially. And then just the cutting of, scissors are dual. There's two pieces to it.
It's symmetrical.
Yeah. And, cutting and killing the tethered person. It's just like, ugh, I loved it.
Right? It's overwhelming. And that movie has convinced me to pay for the CBS All Access, because I have to see his Twilight Zone work. I feel like I'm really going to miss out if I don't see that.
This has been great. It helps me a lot. And actually, I love the movie now. And I mean that sincerely. I really do. I'd gotten the duality thing. I gotten the Jeremiah 11:11. I got the scissors. I got the up and down. I was thinking of it on a dimension of the kind of the duality of a person. And then I think what we're talking about is where he's really going with this is sort of the cultural divide, and that helps a ton. So, and there's a lot of different layers to that. So that's cool. And if you have thoughts about this or a different perspective, we'd love to hear from you. You can tweet us at @shrink_tank or write us at feedback@shrinktank.com. We'd love to hear from you, so give us a note. Our final segment is something that we call Doctor's Orders, and these are things that we're personally enjoying in pop culture that we want to recommend to you. Emma Kate, do you have something?
So I just started reading an excellent book for our video viewers. You can see this, but it is called The Shadow Effect, Illuminating the Hidden Power of Your True Self. And this is by Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, and Marianne Williamson. And the book is somewhat spiritual in nature, but it's funny because I had just started reading this and then I saw the movie and I was like, holy crap, there's stuff from the movie in this book and blah. But so the book is really about trying to help us understand and harness the power of our dark side. And when actions and choices from others bother us, we need to ask ourselves why, because normally there's a reason we don't like it and it's not related to them, it's related to us. So it's a really good book so far.
Cool.
And Frank?
I am going to recommend something that Dr. Wright has already recommended. I was on a road trip and managed to listen to the podcast Lore. So I want to re-recommend Lore, but I want you to do it a little bit differently. I want you to Google what are the best episodes of Lore and watch those, because the quality kind of vacillates a little bit, but specifically the two episodes, The Castle and The Devil in the Details, they are mind-blowing.
Jonathan?
Amazon Prime has a television show called Hannah. It is it's an adaptation of a film made by Joe Wright many years ago. And I would say it's thoroughly enjoyable. It's not particularly original, although it never was. It's sort of a hybrid between a teenage coming-of-age story with the Bourne Identity series. But I think it's thoroughly entertaining. It's pulpy, but it does also have a lot of atmosphere. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Hannah.
And I'm going to recommend, and this is a soft recommendation. It's not one of my emphatic recommendations because I've only seen one episode of it. It was not great. It was just amusing, but it's worth checking out. It's called What We Do in the Shadows. It is a sitcom version of the mockumentary about a house full of vampires. And the season premiere had some, I will just say some shocking things in it, and it's a little bit of a head spinner. Not for the faint of heart, I will say, but if you're into such, give it a whirl. And
definitely check out the film.
Yeah, the film
version.
I love the film,
which is fantastic.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Shrink Tank Podcast. If you like the episode, we hope you'll give us a high rating on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. And for more content exploring the intersection of psychology and pop culture, we hope you'll visit shrinktank.com for great articles and videos. You can also find links to our Doctor's Orders products. And you'll find some Game of Thrones content. We're going to be talking about that next week. So we got a lot of Game of Thrones stuff, and we hope you'll come back for next week. We hope you'll follow us on Twitter at @shrink_tank and like us on Facebook. For questions or comments, drop us a note. Our email is feedback@shrinktank.com. Our producer and theme music composer is Sean Beck, and our associate producer and social media guru is Mariel Butler. For Emma Kate Wright, Jonathan Hedderly, and Frank Gaskell in Charlotte, I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. Tell all your friends about us. Like us on YouTube and subscribe to us on YouTube.
Like us in your heart.
Us, please.
In your
Oh my
heart,
gosh.
like us.
Invite us into your heart and tell all your friends about us and make it a great week.